So with that, I'm going to get into our introductions, and I would love to pass it off to JJ to get us started with intros.
Great. Hey, everyone. My name is JJ Guajardo, class of 97, psychology major. I started at Northwestern in 93 with full intentions of being a medical doctor. I was all about that for about a year and a half until I took a class called Orgo, and it absolutely crushed me and crushed my spirit, my soul. Yeah, I know I see a face up there that's making a really terrible face. I hear you, Kate. Yeah, it was absolutely terrible. And I realized I couldn't do it, and I didn't want to do it. So I started, I was taking psych classes at the time, really loved them, and decided that was where I wanted to go with my major, and ended up going to graduate school down at University of Chicago and got my PhD down there, and ended up taking a role at Microsoft as a contractor at the time in a field called user research. So that's what I do now. I'm a design researcher. You might have heard like usability research, same kind of thing. And yeah, I've been there since I contracted in 02. I went full-time in 05. So I've been about 15 years as a full-timer. And I work in games. So I specifically support Xbox games, our racing titles. And on a day-to-day basis, I do research with customers, try to understand what they like about our experiences, what they don't like, what we can improve, how we can make our games more fun, interesting, engaging, and all that great stuff. I run a lot of like one-on-one kind of studies. I run a lot of group studies. I run a lot of surveys. I'm in Excel or SPSS a lot, doing data analysis. Yeah, so that's kind of my role right now. And yeah, that's happy to answer any questions about that stuff later on. I'll pass it over to Michelle.
Awesome. Had to unmute. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle. So I have a pretty similar background to JJ, except he has many more years of experience. So I'm also a design researcher, user researcher, UX researcher, whatever you want to call it. There are a lot of different names. I'm on the education team, though. So I joined Microsoft back in 2017 and was working across a bunch of different parts of Microsoft. And then about a year ago, ended up on the education team. So I work on things like Teams assignments, which is like a part of Teams for education. And then I also work across kind of a lot of the company. So on all different Office apps like Forms and Word, and it's very kind of, you go deep in one product, but also across the whole company. It's kind of a cool team like that. I graduated Northwestern in 2015. I was, like JJ, a psychology major, also started out pre-med actually, and kind of decided that I liked psychology a lot better. I also had a minor in global health, which was kind of both psychology and global health kind of got me interested in the education field. Took an awesome course, and that was like a joint CESP psych course as well. So yeah, I mostly focus on kind of the qualitative side of things, but work with data scientists and people that are a lot better at the quantitative side of research. I kind of help scope that research, and then maybe somebody else does more of the quantitative, super in-depth work. But yeah, working really closely with PMs, engineers, designers, kind of doing a lot of different things. Yeah, I think that covers it.
Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. Omar here. I was class of 2011, econ major and a BIP minor. Back then, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, so I got into consulting because that was the hot new thing at that time. Realized very quickly that management consulting wasn't for me, but tech consulting is what I wanted to do. So I kind of switched gears a little bit there. Did that for some time, and then got my MBA, and then joined Microsoft. So I've been at Microsoft for almost 3.5 years now. And my role is Microsoft 365 support planner. And really what that is, it's a program management kind of role. I look after Teams, Microsoft Teams, and security and compliance in Office 365. Specifically, what that means on a day-to-day basis is, I have a portfolio of projects whenever we're releasing any new feature or SKU to the market. Before we do that, my job is to work with engineering, marketing to make sure that our support teams are ready. So we have hundreds of thousands of support engineers globally who provide support to our customers. And I focus specifically on commercial customers, so large enterprises. And my role is to make sure that whatever language, whatever time zone that they're in, we have support engineers that are trained and ready to help them, whether it's a service issue, whether it's something on their side, to help them make the most of Microsoft products. So I'm based out of Texas, in Dallas. My manager is actually in Seattle, so that's fun. But it is a global role, so I do get a chance to work with our teams in Japan, India, EMEA. So all in all, it's been a fun journey and great to be here. With that, I'll hand it over to Jian.
Hi everyone, my name is Jian and I graduated Northwestern in 2013. I was a economics and computer science major. I spent my freshman year and a good part of my sophomore year kind of trying to decide what I want to focus on. I kind of thought econ was cool, but it wasn't really like the most my favorite courses weren't in econ and things like that. So I was looking around, and my friend actually was taking intro to game design course in computer science. So I kind of followed her there, and I really enjoyed that class. So I started on the computer science track pretty late, around like sophomore time frame. And I had no background in computer science at all before then. So I thought it was fun at first, but it quickly got very, very difficult in a couple of years. But I made it through, and I graduated 2013, and I joined Microsoft. And I've been here working as a program manager ever since. And what a program manager is in Microsoft is we're part of the engineering team, and program manager basically does a lot of customer research and engagement to figure out the direction of the product and translating customer feedback and ideas and things like that into engineering work. So we manage the engineering backlog. We work with the engineering manager to scope and decide how we want to build certain features. And we also manage kind of the end-to-end shipping and kind of maintenance of our products by doing things like how do we work, thinking about how do we work with marketing people, for example, or go present at conferences, do evangelism, and all kinds of things like that. So you can really think about it as kind of the end-to-end driver for the engineering team, along with the engineering lead. Cool.
Great, thank you for that. One thing I want to point out real quick, I love the common thread between the four of us. We're all like, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I was an undergrad, and here I'm doing this thing, right? So just one quick note to everyone on this call, please don't feel the pressure to have to decide on a career today or yesterday. There's plenty of time to figure it out. So, I thought that's kind of a fun thread between the four of us. So I'm going to take over from here. I'd love to start with the panel. Want you to talk about how you landed a job at Microsoft with your arts and science background, and how does it come into play and work today. I'll start real quick. Just my path, like I said, I went down to University of Chicago, and I was finishing up my PhD there. And after I defended my thesis, I decided to reward myself, and I bought a PlayStation because that was pretty cool. And I started gaming a lot. I'm like, this is kind of fun. And I had intentions prior to that of going into academia, but then I realized I didn't want to do that. So I ended up seeing a job for working at Microsoft and Xbox and games and with kids, which is my background, was developmental psychology. And so I applied, not knowing anything about the field, about usability, user research, had no idea what that meant, but they just said they were looking for someone with research experience. So I jumped on it. And I showed up at Microsoft, and there was a lot of technology and a lot of stuff I had no idea what any of it was, but it didn't matter because that was not what my expected skill set was going to be in. So it just turns out I could do research and look at a problem and analyze it and understand some data. So that's how I landed at Microsoft. And, since then, I think I've become a little bit more technical, but I'm still not very technical, compared to a lot of folks at Microsoft. So, but that's how I end up there. And how about you, Michelle?
Yeah, so kind of a winding, funny path. So like I said before, I studied psychology and global health. And so I ended up taking a course my junior year called the Psychology of Instructional Technology and Design. It was a joint course between psychology and CESP with Professor Rapp. I think he's now just became the dean of CESP, actually. But he was kind of both in Weinberg and CESP, kind of straddling the two. And then ended up going and studying abroad in South Africa on the public health kind of community development program. And just really kind of the global health and that course just kind of like rang a bell finally when I was panicking senior year, like, what do I want to do? And I was like, oh, I guess I could try and work on education technology, like super niche, but that would be kind of cool. And so started looking at jobs, wasn't really getting anything. But then just kind of like had a reflection of like, it would be awesome to actually go and kind of give back and work in a school, not become a teacher forever, but kind of go and teach for a little bit, especially if that's who I want to eventually be making products for. So I did a teaching fellowship in a Chicago public school. And then ended up going to grad school after that at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and they have a program specifically on education technology. So I feel like the story kind of sounds like I had a plan, but really it was just like one step at a time, just kind of like figuring it out. And then after that, I was applying for all sorts of jobs, actually trying to go back finally home to the Bay Area. And then one day just came across something on Instagram around like feature in OneNote, and it was made for students with dyslexia. And I found that really interesting and realized that it's not just Google doing things for education and small startups, like Microsoft is doing stuff too. So was thinking, oh, maybe I'll get an internship there. Turns out I couldn't land an internship because I was graduating soon. So then I was like, okay, I guess I'll just apply full time. And then was like, I still don't know, even after grad school. Came into grad school thinking, do I want to be a designer, a researcher, a PM? I don't know. Came out, still didn't know. So I applied to all of them and actually first interviewed and did a design portfolio review at Microsoft. Then they shifted me over to content, and they're like, oh, not quite a fit for design, but maybe content. And content is kind of more of writing. It could be everything from like in product writing to like support. And then I kept talking about research that whole time. And so then they shifted me over to research, and then finally got an offer and thought, why not? I guess I'll move to Seattle. I'll learn a lot. It wasn't even specific to education. It was on a team that kind of I could work with students, but it wasn't really focused on education, but knew the whole time that was my goal. And Microsoft was really awesome at also like having different opportunities and moving between teams. So about a year and a half after joining Microsoft, finally made it over to the education team. So kind of developed the vision and finally made my way there.
Yeah, no, I think I had a similar kind of experience to what Michelle was describing. It might sound like, a lot of us had a plan, but it really, looking back, you can kind of connect the dots. But at the time, like, I don't think a lot of us had any idea where we would end up. I certainly didn't know I was going to end up at Microsoft. So like I mentioned, I got into consulting because that was a cool thing to do at that time. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew, business was something that interested me. So that's why I stuck with econ. Wasn't very good, to be honest. Econometrics, I think I got a B minus. And I tried for the MMSS program and the Kellogg certificate, but I didn't meet the prerequisites. So it was just econ, and then I did the BIP minor. So got into consulting. I actually started working at A.D. Kearney in Dubai. I wanted, difference. I'd been in Chicago for 4 years, so I wanted a change of scenery, and Dubai seemed like a good place to go and try that. So I did that. Very cool. Consulting definitely does have all that, glitz and glamour that they talk about, travel and all that. But pretty soon I realized that I was burning out. This wasn't something I wanted to do, right? The late nights and weekends and stuff. So I think 9 months into it, I quit, and I didn't really have anything else lined up. So I was kind of unemployed for a while, and looking for a job. IBM at that time had this consulting program for fresh graduates, as well as folks who had less than 2 years of experience. So I kind of fit the bill. It was tech consulting, so it wasn't as intense. Longer projects, right? They were like 4 to 6 week strategy engagements. Actually, one project that I ended up working on was 2 years long. So that was a much better in terms of the work-life balance for me. I did that for a few years, and I was mainly in the healthcare practice there, not by design. It just so happened that the first project that I got onto was for a healthcare client, and then I kind of developed a reputation and expertise. So I kind of stuck with that. But I always knew I wanted to go do an MBA. It wasn't like I was hitting a glass ceiling at that time. It's just something I personally wanted to do. So I went to France for my MBA. Again, I wanted to do something different. Didn't want to, I mean, Kellogg was the other option, obviously, but because I'd already been in Chicago, I wanted something different. Did that, and again, unfortunately or fortunately, most MBAs do end up going into consulting. Actually, I think half of my class ended up going into consulting. So that was mainly the people who were recruiting on campus. I went through the whole cycle again, knowing that that wasn't something I wanted to get into, but hey, you have to pay off your loans, right? So luckily, Microsoft came calling through their college program. At that time, it was called Microsoft Academy for college hires. Now it's called the Aspire program. And so they had one for undergrads as well as one for MBAs. I wasn't really applying for a specific position. It was more like, we're going to see if you're a good fit, right, in terms of your experience, your background, your aptitude. And then we'll figure out where we have a need in the company and we'll place you there. So that's how I kind of got into the program, interviewed in Seattle. Still didn't know what role I was going to get into. And then they told me, hey, we're going to make you a support planner. You've got some program management experience from consulting, so we think it's a good fit. And I was like, sure. I was just happy to get into Microsoft. I had no idea what the role meant. So that's how I got in. I've still been in that same role since then. Enjoy it now, taking on more responsibility, kind of expanded my scope in terms of the products that I work on. But yeah, that's kind of the journey of how I came to where I am right now.
Yeah, for me, I think around, I think junior year, I think I took an internship as a developer at a at a small startup called Spot On. I think doesn't exist anymore, but in Chicago. And I was doing that for the summer, and I realized, especially as a developer intern, I guess you don't really have a lot of say in terms of like how you want to drive the product and things like that. So, and you're kind of like, at the desk working on a project that you've been given, and that's kind of the everyday life of an intern. And I realized, I didn't really enjoy that. Like I wanted to talk to people, and I wanted to kind of hear, you know, why we're building this, what's so interesting about our product, and I was kind of looking around at inside the startup, kind of looking at, oh, well, what are other people doing, right? And there was a person there who was a product owner. So she's or product manager. So it's a slightly different role from program manager from Microsoft, but it's a little bit more marketing leaning. But it's that role still looked at, how we want to tell the story around our product, and how do you want to sell this, and a lot of these interesting stuff, and like who our customers are, and all that. So I went and talked to her about what she does, which seemed really interesting, and although she didn't have a technical background, she was still working in a technical field, and I thought that was pretty cool. So when I came back and, going into kind of senior years when we were actually looking for applying for jobs, I knew Microsoft's PM role had a lot of these aspects, and it's been something that I had wanted to kind of try out. So I didn't get in the internship the past year, but I applied again for a full time and did the interview, and I got in through that. So ever since, I've been a program manager. I didn't have as much, I think, kind of different like I wasn't trying out different aspects as much, I think, in terms of switching roles. But for me, the program managing role was a really good fit because I still got to be technical, because program managers are mostly technical at Microsoft, but also get to, use some of, kind of the social sciences skills that, I learned at Weinberg and applying that for my day-to-day job. So I think that was a really good fit for me. And even at Microsoft, the role PM has a lot of different roles. So depending on the org or team you're in, a PM can be doing very, very different things. So for example, I'm inside the developer division inside Azure, which is the Microsoft cloud. And because we deal with cloud technology and also we do a lot of work developing developer tools, PMs here are more technical. Usually we know how to code or do more of those kinds of things, right? And but if you go somewhere else where it's a little bit more focused on the consumer side, where it's not as developer focused, you'll see very like PM roles that are very different. Like if it's like a Surface PM, then they are going to be experts at dealing with hardware. And things like that. So very different roles. And even within our organization, I found that, there's quite a lot of different tracks where a PM can build expertise. So it could be data analytics for products. So looking at telemetry, looking at analyzing customer data for and how that impacts the product, or doing more customer research, similar to kind of our UX researchers here, where you might not be really looking at UX specifically as a research project, but you could be looking at how customers work through a certain problem and things like that using your product. So there's quite a lot of different things there. And even, as even though I've kind of stayed stable on a single role since joining Microsoft, I feel like, it's always a learning experience. You're always trying to make decisions on what's kind of the track I want to go. Is it a manager track? Is it a data science track? And and that's kind of where you get a lot of different exposure to different things, I think.
That's great. Thanks for that. I think Jian's hitting on something really interesting too, at least, that I've noticed in Microsoft, my time there. My role is defined, by a title, but the things I do are very different than what Michelle might be doing or that any other researcher at Microsoft might be doing. In Jian's role as a PM, I've seen PMs, be essentially graphic designers, or schedule managers, or, working as localization PMs, whatever it might be. There's so many different experiences within a given title at a large tech company. I'm sure the same applies for a Google or Facebook or Amazon, anything like that. So just, some advice when you're looking at descriptions of things, don't feel like that's the only thing that one might do in that role. There's so many different ways you can expand and specialize within that. So it's kind of cool. I'd love to move to the next question, and Jian, we'll start with you if that's okay. So what were some impactful classes or experiences for you in school that led you to consider, looking at a career at a large tech company?
I think because I was a little bit more focused on tech when I was going into more senior years of college, I think definitely more of the computer science classes had a bigger impact. I think I forget the exact name of the class actually, but it was a very project-driven class where, I think it was natural language processing actually, where we were the first few weeks were just kind of learning about, what natural language processing means and, what are the technologies we could use for that. But after that, it was pretty much project driven. So we created project groups, and we were supposed to come up with a product that or project that would use natural language processing. So it'd be things like when you search for like recipes, we would use, what are, kind of the terms you're using to search for matches and these kinds of things. So I think, just kind of having experience working in these groups, just like ideating and kind of working together, I think those really helped kind of, uh, set my path towards being a PM. And actually, I think one of the things that was really helpful, although this wasn't a class, I did a nonprofit organization when I was at Northwestern, and I was basically the director of org within that org, right? And kind of the management aspect of looking at setting schedules for a project, kind of delivering a project end to end, from just thinking about it and kind of brainstorming with our teammates, and then running a program through that nonprofit. Like, I think that experience really helped in terms of getting kind of the leadership skills, as well as kind of teamwork skills that's needed for most jobs, right? So yeah, so I think those are kind of the important pieces I took away from my undergrad.
Yeah, so for me, I think it was not as straightforward. Because I didn't know what I was going to get into, but I think one of the courses that particularly kind of sticks out was the Chicago Field Studies program. I'm not sure if that's still there, but that was okay. It is there. So that was actually the first opportunity for me to do a real kind of internship, right? And I was fortunate enough; I had a chance to do it with Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs, and I picked Goldman Sachs in private wealth management. It's a great experience, right? First time in kind of corporate America, taking the L and going downtown every day. It's fun. And then, coming back to class on Friday and kind of taking those practical lessons and kind of, putting it together with the theory that we were learning in class as well. I think that was super useful for me. It helped me understand what I didn't want to do. So obviously, with Goldman Sachs and some of the other names that were in the program, like, it was very prestigious, and it's kind of on the business side of things, right? What I wanted to do, but after doing the internship, I realized, okay, this is not something I'm interested in from a function perspective. So that kind of helped me narrow down my options. I think in terms of courses that helped me maybe pick up some of the skills that I was able to kind of later apply in my tech roles. I think definitely econometrics and I think it was introduction to statistics. Even though I wasn't very good at those, right? I think in most tech companies, right, everything runs on data, right? And so even if you're not like a data scientist, you need to be comfortable with data. And so I think those classes helped me develop some of the tools that I needed to be able to kind of apply them in my day-to-day job, right? Anytime you're trying to make a business case, you're going to have to crunch some numbers, right? Maybe create like a very simple kind of model and be able to make that case. So I think having that background helps. I think the other piece was some of the seminars and maybe some of the electives that I took actually that were not part of my econ major. So history of modern India. I think I took introduction to literature and a few other kind of what at that time I thought were random classes, right? But I think what they helped was how do you construct an argument, right? And how do you tell a story? Because at the end of the day, in a lot of our roles, we don't really have people reporting directly to us, right? We're kind of working in a matrix organization. Resources are controlled by someone else, and someone else has to actually go and do the job. So you have to align stakeholders quite a bit, and basically build consensus. And a lot of that kind of, building that story and being able to convince people, right? I think the term they use is um, getting work done through influence rather than authority, right? So you really need that. And I think those courses help me develop some of the skills.
Yeah, you guys make all very good points. I guess to think of other courses, so I mentioned kind of that course before that was super impactful for me to kind of even discover that ed tech and designing educational products was even a thing. But it was also, yeah, about group work. And honestly, if you can't work in a group, like that's just something you need to learn. Whether it's kind of, working with people that you're forced to work with, like are actually on your team, but also like what Omar said, like influencing those people outside, especially as a researcher, influence is a very big thing. A lot of people joke that they switch from research to PM, so you have more of like the I don't know, hat of influence. As a researcher, you kind of try to finagle your way into other people's plans, I guess, and a lot of influencing. But yeah, I think my going into being a researcher, a lot of people come from like PhDs. So I kind of had a little bit of I'm forgetting the term there, but like, oh my God, am I good enough to be a researcher? And I think though my psychology major really prepared me more than I even knew until I joined the job. Things like research methods. I placed out of statistics and actually didn't take statistics at Northwestern, but I wish I took it in advanced statistics class because I think it was last year I actually had to crack open a statistics textbook. I didn't think I'd have to ever do that again, but it was like, oh man. So all of these courses that like you don't really, I don't know, they seem like, oh, this might be kind of boring, but they're like super foundational and like really help you understand how to think it like a scientist, how to think about data. So yeah, there's that. And yeah, I think just like the group work courses and just those foundational kind of soft skills and thinking about kind of data and things like that, I think are the ones that come to mind. Oh, JJ, you're.
Couldn't find the button. Technology. Yeah, I think, yeah, some of the experiences, early in Northwestern, I was working in a neuroscience lab and we were like dissecting rats, which is really gross. And when I decided I didn't want to be, go into medicine, I got the hell out of there as quickly as I could. And I went and worked in the marketing and advertising studio at Norris, right? That's a thing apparently. And I got to do lots of graphic design stuff and work with really cool software. And I guess I said before, I wasn't the most technical coming into Microsoft by any means, but I always had an interest in technology or in software and kind of using new tools. And I mean, this is 95, so it wasn't like the whole world ran on computers at that point. So that was a really fun experience and just kind of like sparked my interest in technology. So I kind of always had it in the back of my head, that was interesting in some way. I didn't know I was going to go into Microsoft by any means, but certainly those kind of experiences along the way, just kind of help me not be scared, of seeing something like a Microsoft, job posting. So I also loved another thread here that I saw was people just kind of having these almost like, I don't know, accidental experiences, and picking up on that and using that as a seed to spark an interest here or there and ending up where you are, which is amazing. Or also having experiences that just kind of ruled it out. Like Omar said, like, I knew I didn't want to do that. Right. So just taking on a variety of experiences to give you, exposure to things that you might want to do, or you absolutely know you don't want to do after that. Like it's really good, to get that breath, in what you're doing. So that's kind of fun. I think, Cassie, we probably have time for one more question. Does that sound reasonable? Okay, cool. So I'm going to look at, I like this one around the global health crisis because it's so, top of mind right now. But I'd just love to hear from everyone around, how the work you're doing has shifted in response to, what's going on out there in the world. I think it'd be, we have a bunch of students on here who have now change the way that they have to approach their everyday lives, based on some bad stuff. And I'd love to hear from all of us about how our daily lives at work have changed and how we've adjusted to the crisis. I'll go first. And Michelle, I'm sure you're going to have a lot of the same things. So I'm not going to take everything as a researcher, but we've had to move, all of our research work where before we'd bring people into our facilities and talk to them one-on-one or whatever in groups and things like that. We are no longer in the buildings and we can't bring people in. So we have had to move completely remotely, which has been hard but interesting too. And do not want to at all put a silver lining on this awful situation, but it has given us the ability to talk to people from outside of our normal sphere. When we normally do work here at Microsoft, at least in Redmond, Seattle, we talk to people from Redmond and Seattle. And now moving remotely, we're talking to people all over the United States and all over the world, really, doing, virtual kind of research with them. So that's been an interesting side effect and something I hope that we continue once we all go back to work in normal capacities. But we've shifted to, working remotely in that way with our customers, but it's given us, a little bit broader perspective on things as well. So, Michelle, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I actually do have a little bit of a different experience. So my first role as a researcher at Microsoft, it was very much I'm in a lab behind like a one-way mirror. There are people and we're using computers on the other side. But then when I switched to the education team, and even before that, I was doing a lot of remote research because in education, you only get one very small perspective if you just speak to people locally. There wasn't a huge need for talking to people in person, and there was so much more value already pre-pandemic talking to people remotely. A couple weeks ago talked to a professor in Saudi Arabia. Like that's extremely different from talking to a professor or a elementary school teacher in the Redmond kind of Seattle area. So it just kind of gave us the extra push, though, I think, to think more strategically about like how do we think about all of these different audiences that we want to cater to. On the education team, we're talking to teachers, we're talking to administrators, we're talking to students, we're talking to higher ed, K-12, we're talking to the IT admins too, the people that like set up your email and Zoom and everything for you. So our growth went like 10x because everyone, whether they liked it or not, was forced to go online pretty much. So it was really not so much a question of like, how do we move to online, but how do we just like scale ourselves? Like I've had to think a lot more strategically, and I've really grown, I think, in my career around like, what should we do and not do? As a researcher, there's like one of you and like, I don't know, 20 engineers, 4 designers, 4 PMs. So you really have to think about like, what is really worth it, and like, where should I invest my time and energy? And then I think the other big impact for me was, again, not moving research online, but moving collaboration online. And I think all of you guys, students and alumni, have had that transition happen. But how do we just kind of work together collaboratively? Especially, I've been down in California with my family this whole pandemic. It really doesn't matter where you are anymore. And Microsoft has been super supportive of that as well. Just kind of working wherever you need to be. Yeah. Omar?
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Like, it doesn't really matter where you are now. I think for me, because my manager and most of my team was already in Seattle, I was already kind of working from home. I actually moved away from the office because I didn't need to go into the office. So it didn't really change too much, except now all meetings are, online, and have been to the office in like, I don't know, 8 months or something. And we're basically renovating the office. So we're not going to go in there until July. So this is pretty much a permanent kind of situation. But I think the main thing was there is a lot more flexibility now. I think people understand that, just because we're fortunate enough to be able to work from home, right? Like, we're not frontline workers where we're having to go in, and be physically there. We're lucky that way that we're safe. But at the same time, everyone's in a different situation, right? Like, someone has young kids, someone has older parents to take care of, right? Someone is in a city where it's just housing is crazy expensive, and so they don't have the luxury of a home office. So there's a lot more understanding. One of my teammates, for example, she takes Wednesdays off. This just something that Microsoft has introduced. It's a special kind of leave that you can have because she has twins who are going to school, and so she needs to help them with homeschooling. So there's all this kind of flexibility that's really there now. I think a lot of the roles, so we've always had like roles in different locations, right? Obviously, Redmond being headquarters, even engineering roles, we had some in Prague. We obviously have a lot in India, even in China. But I think now more and more engineering teams, at least the ones that I work with, are realizing that we don't really need to be physically in one place. So I think that's a good thing for folks who are looking at new roles at Microsoft, is because you're not kind of limited by geography. If there's a positive that's come out of this situation, I think that's certainly one. Yeah, I think from a business standpoint, right, like what Michelle mentioned, like the 10x kind of growth that we've seen, that's certainly something that we were on the we had a front seat to, obviously with so many new customers, both on the commercial side as well as EDU, using Teams, we had a lot more people calling in for support. And so we had to figure out how do we scale rapidly, right? Obviously, we have support teams kind of spread out globally, but we had to think about different sites. And then those countries themselves going into lockdown. So how do people actually then get into work? Previously, all of our support teams would come to a physical location. You're not allowed to have cell phones on the floor, right, because of customer data and privacy concerns. But now everyone is at home and they have to support other customers from home. How do we make that happen? So there's really a lot of like creative thinking that came in terms of how do we resolve for this situation. So definitely been a learning experience. Hopefully we can get out of it and be able to then work from home by choice rather than being forced. But yeah, definitely interesting times to live.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all the new efforts that we've had to face as, product teams, or, as different teams at Microsoft, in terms of being able to scale to meet the new demands to go virtual, right? And I think, there's definitely cool challenges to that. But I think the part I wanted to focus on a little bit, because I think, is um, like, because everyone's working remotely, there has definitely been more difficulties in terms of collaboration, I think. It's definitely something that I think all teams are kind of still working through, in terms of, how to maximize impact while everyone's at home, right? Like, personally for me, I think because I'm in a role where I have to stay aligned with so many stakeholders, and kind of communicate that out, as well as kind of make sure if there's any, disagreements or conflicts, like having that over video chat has turned out to be not great. So I definitely feel the impact of having to collaborate over video. It is pretty straining, and as I'm sure you're also seeing that when you work with classmates, or when you work with your professors as well. So I think it's just something that everyone's kind of going through. I think everyone's still trying to find out, figure out what's the best way for them. At least I'm still doing that. And I'm finding that, disconnecting from work has also been harder, where, you do take, maybe breaks during the day, but after, let's say, you finish work and you have dinner, it's so easy to just go back into your study, or go back to your laptop and do a little bit more, or check one more email, and it just kind of breaks the rhythm, and kind of, I guess, breaks the separation you have from like home and work, right? So that's been something that, I've been really consciously trying to kind of stay away from. So I would try to do things like a walk after work, and try to stay away from the computer after work. And, so I think it's still a work in progress, at least for me. But, I think it's just affecting everyone because of that. So I personally, am excited to go back to office once it opens. I think, Microsoft's pretty flexible about how you work. So I think, you know, being able to go into office to collaborate with others and having a few days back home where you can just focus on your work. I think, that could be an interesting setup once we do have the office open. But yeah, so I think for me, the COVID situation has been all about collaboration. It's been something I've been thinking about, like how do we set up our team to better communicate and better collaborate with each other, even if we're all apart? And I'm sure that's, something we'll continue to work through as we go.
Great, thank you for that. And one thing I wanted to add, just kind of a theme I'm seeing too, and at least around us four and what else I'm seeing at Microsoft is I feel like the pandemic has sort of shown a light on humanity in an interesting way. Like we see each other as people now. Like we're in our spaces, we look around people's living rooms, offices, things like that, and their kids are running around, and there's just sort of a new level of patience and understanding that I don't think I anticipated prior to this from especially from a large tech company where you think it's like all high pressure and all that good stuff. And, people are like, just take a day off. You need to take a day off to help your kid with school to do it. Right. And it feels a little kinder and gentler, which is interesting as well. So that's the, takes us to with about 10 minutes left. Cassie, do you have questions from folks that you want to ask us?
Yes, I would love to get into student questions. And as we get started, please feel free to send in more questions, students, as they come up through the next 10 minutes. And of course, can follow up after if you'd like as well. But our first question, and I'd love to go get perspectives from everyone on this, but Ada wrote in, is a graduate degree necessary for design UX research? And I know some of you have grad degrees, some of you don't. I'd love your perspectives on like how that plays into your role. Could you do it without? Maybe just chat a little bit about that. And Jian, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, so I think for technical roles, it's really, it's not really, at least I think it's becoming more like this. It's not really about what degree you have or, what school you're from. I think it's becoming more and more that what skills do you have, right? So in our interviews are set up to try to catch those skills that you have rather than, looking at, oh, you're from this school, you're from this program and all that. So definitely, I think, programs do offer benefit in the sense that you get more connections, you have more visibility into kind of the hiring events and things like that companies run with, bigger schools. So for example, like I found out about interviews with Microsoft when I went to a career fair at Northwestern, right? So I think there's definitely those kinds of benefits, but for technical roles, I think I'll let others speak for their roles as well. But at least for technical roles, I think it's really about being able to for certain roles, like for developer roles, like being able to code and being able to do that well. And we see, developers from all walks of life, like, they, graduated, I don't know, some people with like literature degrees, and then, but they kind of learned how to code on the side. They, got some industry experience, either from a startup or from personal projects and things like that, and they were able to apply that skill through the interview and become a developer. So I think there's really no set path to becoming part of a technical role. I think it's really just making sure, if that is something you're interested in, looking at how to do coding or looking at how to do analysis of data, and just kind of doing what's necessary to get those skills and be able to show those skills during an interview or through conversations. So I think that's kind of the more important thing. So I definitely don't think a grad school is necessary for technical roles. For example, like I didn't graduate from I just did undergrad and came to Microsoft. Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. I'll go ahead. Yeah, so I think in my role, I've seen people both, right? Like people who've done graduate degrees and people who haven't. I don't think it's a prerequisite I think, as Jian mentioned, like it's more about the skills that you're able to demonstrate. I think, you know, your resume obviously needs to kind of be convincing for you to be able to make that first cut, right? And then once you have a shot in front of the interviewer, then you can kind of tell your story about, you know, the different skill sets that you bring. I think more than anything right now, it's not like, you know, you can take a specific course and be ready to do your job on day one, right? There's a lot of learning on the job. So what most people are hiring for, at least in the non-technical roles, you know, I'm just speaking from experience there, is more about your adaptability, right? Like, are you, and I think people at Microsoft will know this, there's all this talk about growth mindset, right? Like, are you willing and able to learn, right? Are you a know-it-all versus a learn-it-all? And really that's what they're looking for. I think, you know, for example, like consulting cases, right? Like that's not something that we do in our interviews, at least not in the ones that I've been involved in. But I think it's a good way to kind of learn how to break down problems into smaller chunks, right? And kind of demonstrate your problem solving skills. So I would highly recommend that as part of the recruiting process to just kind of go through. I know it's not fun, but I wasn't very good at those, but I think they help you kind of make a more structured decision making and problem solving process. Yeah, so I think Michelle, what are your thoughts on that?
So research is interesting. I feel like most people have a graduate degree, but some people do not. So a lot of the job postings you'll see will say like you need to have at least a master's or a PhD. And honestly, as someone with a master's, sometimes I feel underqualified. But I think it's also because I'm just like, I feel like I'm very different from a lot of researchers where even I have never even written a thesis. Like I have just done like small research project here and there and like done internships and you know, like did a research project as part of like a semester class, but I never had like a thesis to get my you know, undergraduate degree or my master's. It was a lot of more like practical hands-on sort of stuff, and then created a portfolio that kind of crossed between design and research that kind of showed my chops in both. And then I was able to kind of get my foot in the door. And like Omar said, learn a lot on the job. Like I said before, like I had to show in my interviews that I understood how to do research and, you know, what a sample size of 4 versus 400 really means and why you might want that. But I think it was a little bit of like preparation meets miraculous opportunity that there was kind of a job that met my skill set and I was able to really grow from there. I also think it depends on like the manager hiring. I think there's some managers in the industry that are kind of stuck in the old school ways of like, no, you need a PhD. But then there are some that are just like, it's, you know, just prove yourself and that you kind of know what you're thinking and that you can grow. And then I also have a friend that's a researcher who became a contractor like JJ, and then, you know, you get your experience that way and then convert to full time. It just might take, you know, a little bit longer, but also a lot of those people transition into higher up levels than if you started full time from the bottom. So it kind of different paths that you can take to get there. Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can go, I guess. Anything you want to add, JJ?
Yeah, I mean, I look at our group, we got 30, 35 researchers on the team full time, and I think probably 95% of us have PhDs. And I know the last 15 people we hired have PhDs. I think we use it as a very easy heuristic, right? Like you said, that you have to demonstrate in interviews that you know X, Y, and Z around research, where we can look at a piece of paper and say, oh, we know you know it, right? We can ask about other stuff in the interview coming in. That being said, to your point, Michelle, we have vendor roles that do not require a graduate degree at all. And if you can prove your worth there, like absolutely, we bring people up through the ranks. We've been doing that, history of doing that as well. So there's definitely opportunities, you know, for people without, you know, masters and PhDs coming in, but certainly it does help, at least on the research side of things, to get that advanced degree.
That's really great and really helpful, getting everyone's perspectives from different teams on graduate degrees and whatnot. And I know we're approaching the end of our hour together. I'd love to do just one quick go around. We had another question come in from Nina asking of like what types of skills or backgrounds Microsoft might be looking for from undergrad candidates, whether it's for, you know, research, design research, or any, you know, some of these positions. Maybe can we go through, starting with JJ, like one skill or piece of a background that you think is helpful, and we'll kind of piece it together.
I think if you get, you know, internships in the summer at other places, that shows a, you know, a willingness to go do some cool stuff and have some cool experience that someone else has kind of vetted you for us. So yeah, absolutely. That's a huge help in our minds.
Kind of mentioned this before, but just like the ability to learn and grow. Growth mindset is a term used all the time at Microsoft. And yeah, just keep learning and be able to work well with others.
Yeah, I think I second that. I think you know, being able to get work done through influence, like if you can demonstrate that, right, whether it's through an internship or you know, even like a project or a group that you were involved with, right? I think that's super important because coming in, you know, especially out of undergrad, you're not going to have like a team of 5-10 people reporting to you. You're going to be that individual contributor, and you're going to need to work with a lot of different people across teams to get anything done. So I think it's an absolutely key skill.
Yeah, I think definitely leadership, showing leadership abilities, either through past experiences or, you know, internships or other programs. I think that's super important. I think specifically for the PM role, I think the ability to break down problems, being able to think through step by step of how do we take this vague question and really turn this into a concrete answer and concrete solution, or, you know, a roadmap. You know, I think that's something really important for the PM role, and a lot of our interviews are designed to try to get you to do that exercise and kind of see how you think through that. So I think, you know, interviews are definitely something you just need to practice. I definitely, it's, you know, partly your skill, but it's also some practice and just kind of getting into that mindset. So I would really recommend, you know, either doing it with each other, you know, like the interviews, you know, kind of prep, and or, you know, ask around alumni or professors, or, you know, people to get that experience. Omar.
Yeah, just want to add, I think that's super important what Jian just mentioned. Just have a lot of different stories prepared, right, for different situations, right? You know, demonstrating teamwork, right, overcoming an obstacle, all of those things. And I think practicing those, it's one thing to have it written down or having it in your mind, but actually sitting down with, you know, a teammate, friend, right, a roommate, and actually talking through it can help.
Absolutely.
Oh, and just to add one more thing, I think a good thing that sometimes you don't think about and when preparing for interviews is like, what would you have done differently, or what could you have done even better as well? You know, not just like, what did you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is great. So many great tips, and I really appreciate you all for sharing so many stories, and also, you know, this last quick go around of the skills and pieces of, you know, the backgrounds that are going to be important for our students to consider as they're looking for their postgraduate careers. So this has been really great. Thank you, alumni, so much for being here with us today and sharing more about your work at Microsoft. Very interesting to hear about it. And students, you know, I know we didn't get to, Nina, we didn't get to all of your question. I would definitely encourage students, if you have, you know, further questions, reach out to the alumni. I'm going to send that information out later today. And students, also be on the lookout. I will send out some information about how to access your $20 Grubhub gift card, credit, whatever you want to call it. We normally buy you guys lunch during these programs, and we can't right now because it's not in person, but hopefully this will allow you to get some food on the Waldron Student Alumni Connections program. And, you know, as a quick thank you, of course, for joining us today. So again, thank you everyone for being here. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and go Cats.